Despite the constitutional promises, judicial precedents, and departmental policies mandating truthfulness from law enforcement officers, the American criminal legal system continues to suffer from widespread failures to uphold the standard of complete candor. These failures are not merely the result of isolated misconduct. They are symptoms of deeper structural deficiencies, gaps in training, culture, oversight, and enforcement that permit and even incentivize dishonesty in law enforcement practice. Part 3 explores the systemic vulnerabilities that allow truth to be sidelined in favor of expediency, loyalty, or control. These vulnerabilities are not hypothetical. They are visible in wrongful convictions, suppressed evidence, fabricated reports, coerced confessions, and a wide range of documented officer misconduct. They persist in both urban and rural jurisdictions, across political boundaries and institutional lines, suggesting that the issue is endemic rather than anomalous. This section serves as a transition from the principles of law and ethics to the realities of practice. It lays the groundwork for the case studies that follow by illuminating the broad patterns that make those case studies possible and all too common. The normalization of misconduct. One of the most dangerous characteristics of systemic failure is the normalization of unacceptable behavior. In too many law enforcement agencies, small deviations from truth-creative writing in reports, minor exaggerations in testimony, routine omissions of inconvenient facts are not treated as misconduct, but as occupational habits. This normalization process often begins during training. Recruits may witness or hear about senior officers bending the truth with impunity. Supervisors may fail to challenge questionable statements. Over time, these practices become part of the organizational culture, protected by a code of silence and reinforced by peer validation. Truthfulness is no longer treated as a baseline expectation, but as a strategic choice, one to be weighed against other priorities, such as officer safety, conviction rates, or loyalty to colleagues. This culture of acceptable dishonesty creates an environment where more serious violations such as fabricating probable cause, coercing confessions, or omitting exculpatory evidence can emerge and flourish. Once truth is seen as optional, its erosion becomes not just possible, but inevitable. Lack of meaningful oversight. Another key failure is a lack of independent, robust oversight mechanisms to detect and deter officer dishonesty. In many jurisdictions, internal affairs divisions are understaffed, procedurally weak, or culturally aligned with the very officers they are supposed to investigate. Civilian oversight bodies, where they exist, often lack subpoena power, funding, or political independence. Prosecutors, who rely on officers for investigations and courtroom testimony, are often reluctant to expose misconduct that might jeopardize ongoing cases or institutional relationships. The result is a system in which many officers can lie, omit, or distort the truth with minimal fear of accountability. Even when misconduct is identified, the consequences are often limited to administrative discipline, suspension, retraining, or reassignment rather than criminal prosecution or termination. In extreme cases, officers with histories of dishonesty simply move to other agencies, a phenomenon known as the gypsy cop problem, where misconduct follows the officer like a sealed file. Judicial oversight also falls short. Judges rarely make explicit findings that officers have lied on the stand, even when testimony is demonstrably false. Instead, they may describe testimony as inconsistent or unreliable, avoiding direct accusations of perjury. This reluctance to formally confront dishonesty allows officers to continue testifying in other cases with their credibility technically intact. Inadequate enforcement of disclosure obligations. Legal doctrines like Brady v. Maryland and Giglio v. United States impose clear disclosure obligations on prosecutors and, by extension, on law enforcement. These doctrines require the sharing of exculpatory evidence and impeachment material. Yet, enforcement of these obligations remains inconsistent at best. Prosecutors often lack systems for tracking officer misconduct, particularly in jurisdictions without formal Brady/Giglio databases. Even when such systems exist, the quality and completeness of the information varies widely. In some offices, disclosure relies entirely on voluntary notifications from police departments. In others, disciplinary records are shielded from prosecutors by union agreements, sealed personnel files, or vague internal policies. The result is that many officers with known credibility problems continue to testify without disclosure to the defense. Defendants may be convicted based on the word of officers who have falsified evidence, lied under oath, or violated departmental policies information that, if known, might have altered the outcome of their cases. Institutional incentives for dishonesty. At the heart of many failures in truth-telling is a perverse set of institutional incentives. Officers are rewarded for arrests, not for accuracy. Prosecutors are measured by conviction rates, not by how fairly the case was handled. Promotions, raises, and public praise often flow to those who get results, even if those results come at the expense of truth. In such an environment, telling the whole truth may feel like a liability. Reporting exculpatory evidence may be seen as undermining the case. Admitting mistakes may be interpreted as disloyalty. Whistleblowers who try to uphold complete candor often face retaliation from peers or supervisors, while those who remain silent or complicit are rewarded with institutional acceptance or even advancement. This incentive structure produces a quiet but powerful message. Candor is not required, it's optional, and potentially career-damaging. For officers on the front lines, the message is clear. Do what it takes to make the case, not necessarily what it takes to get it right. Flawed disciplinary and decertification systems. Even when officers are caught in a lie, whether in a report, a deposition, or on the witness stand, disciplinary consequences are often minimal. Many departments lack consistent policies for handling dishonesty. Union contracts may mandate arbitration procedures that overturn firings. Some agencies permit officers to resign in lieu of discipline, allowing them to seek employment elsewhere without formal findings of misconduct on their record. In many states, the process for decertifying an officer revoking their law enforcement license is slow, opaque, or virtually non-existent. A fired officer in one county can often find work in another with little more than a change of uniform. Without centralized, transparent systems for flagging dishonest officers, the problem of serial misconduct persists unchecked. Recent reforms in some states have sought to address this gap by creating statewide decertification databases or expanding public access to disciplinary records. But these reforms are not yet universal, and many rely on voluntary compliance or underfunded oversight boards. Cultural resistance to transparency. Beyond legal and procedural gaps lies a deeper cultural resistance to transparency. In many agencies, the prevailing ethos is one of loyalty and secrecy. The blue wall of silence is not a myth, it is a real and pervasive phenomenon that deters officers from reporting misconduct, discourages open critique, and reinforces solidarity over accountability. This culture is often exacerbated by hostile relationships with the media, skepticism of civilian oversight, and an us versus them mentality in high-crime communities. In such a climate, officers who prioritize transparency are seen not as ethical leaders, but as liabilities. Conversely, those who protect the institution even through dishonesty are rewarded with trust and status. Changing this culture requires more than policy reform. It requires leadership at every level that models candor, enforces consequences, and affirms that truthfulness is not just a legal requirement, but a moral imperative. Until that shift occurs, systemic resistance will continue to undermine even the most well-intentioned reforms. The compounding effect of silence. Perhaps the most insidious feature of systemic failure is its compounding effect. Each instance of tolerated dishonesty reinforces the idea that misconduct is permissible. Officers who see colleagues lie without consequence are more likely to do the same. Prosecutors who fail to disclose one problematic officer are more likely to do so again. Judges who look the other way in one suppression hearing may be less inclined to intervene in the next. This cycle of silence and inaction breeds institutional cynicism. Truth becomes a tool, not a principle, something to be deployed when convenient and ignored when costly. In this environment, justice becomes a negotiation, not a standard, and public trust erodes accordingly. Conclusion. The failures and gaps in the criminal legal system's commitment to truth are not the result of bad apples alone. They are the product of deep-rooted systemic vulnerabilities, cultural, procedural, legal, and institutional, that allow dishonesty to take root and grow. These failures compromise individual cases, shatter public trust, and fundamentally distort the relationship between the people and the state. Fixing these failures requires more than accountability after the fact. It requires a proactive and sustained commitment to truth at every level of the system, from the first responding officer to the highest court. Only when truth is treated not as a luxury, but as a non-negotiable duty, can the system begin to restore its legitimacy. In the chapters that follow, we will examine specific case studies where these failures became painfully visible. From high-profile scandals to overlooked local controversies, these examples will illustrate what happens when the system permits dishonesty and what must change to ensure it never becomes acceptable again. I am a dedicated author and researcher specializing in the intricate nexus of technology, law, and government. My extensive body of work includes a diverse array of books, scholarly articles, and policy papers that delve into the evolving challenges and opportunities presented by technological advancements within legal and governmental contexts. Through rigorous analysis and insightful exploration, I examine how emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, data privacy, and blockchain shape and are shaped by legislative frameworks, regulatory practices, and public policy initiatives. My publications aim to bridge the gap between technical innovation and legal governance, providing comprehensive resources for policymakers, legal professionals, technologists, and academics alike. By addressing critical issues like digital rights, cyber law, technology-driven governance, and the ethical implications of technological integration, my work contributes to the development of informed and adaptive legal systems capable of responding to rapid technological change. I am committed to fostering a deeper understanding of how technology influences governmental operations and legal standards, and vice versa, thereby promoting the creation of robust, equitable, and forward-thinking policies. In addition to my writing, I actively engage with government agencies, legal institutions, and technology firms to offer expertise and collaborate on initiatives that ensure the responsible and effective implementation of technology in public spheres. My dedication to exploring and elucidating the intersections of technology, law, and government underscores my commitment to advancing knowledge and facilitating informed decision-making in an increasingly digitalized world.